Copy 724, right. Center maintain 2000.
Center maintain 2074.
Comment 504 to center maintain 3000.
3000, comment 504.
In this video, we're gonna be try to complete this section. This is gonna be the second part, second video of this section. So we were talking last time. We were talking about the pre-ignition, right? So what can you do in order to like avoid, or when you see the pre-ignition, what can you can be done? So pre-ignition. So the corrective action for pre-ignition include any type of engine operation which would promote cooling, right? So you can either reduce the power, or you can reduce the climb rate for better cooling, or you can enrich the fuel air mixture, and then you can also, if you have the cowl flaps, you can open the cowl flaps. Okay, so during the during the before takeoff run up, right, you switch the magnetos from both position to the right position, and notice there is no RPM drop. And you should know that when switching from the both positions to the right position, there should be an RPM drop. So if you don't know, if you notice that there is no RPM drop, what condition does that indicate? So basically, we are switching from both magnetos to the right one, and we don't see an RPM drop. So what the reason for that is that the left P lead is not grounding, or the engine has been running only on the right magnetos, right? Because the left magnetos has totally failed. So basically meaning that only the left magnetos, like they have totally failed, and the engine is just running on the right magnetos. That is the reason that you won't see the RPM drop. So now I wanted to talk about the ammeter. And if you should know that normally in normal conditions, or if everything is right, it should be in the center, right? So but what happens, like so what is the indication, like if the ammeter is indicating a right deflection, a positive one? So again, if this is the one we want to cover, if the ammeter is having a right deflection, right? So we're covering two scenarios here: after starting and during flight. So after starting, if you have seen the right deflection, right, power from the battery used for starting is being replenished by the alternator, or if a full scale charge is indicated for more than 1 minute, the starter is still engaged and a shutdown is indicated. That's what it is if it is right deflection after the startup. But if you see it during the flight, that means that there's a faulty voltage regulator which is causing the alternator to overheat the battery. So yeah, that won't be good. So basically you need to terminate the flight as soon as possible, or you can give it a try by resetting the system. Okay, the second one is what happens if there is a left deflection, right? So if there is a left deflection on the ammeter, it's not in the center. And so again, we're going to be covering two scenarios here. After starting, if that happens, that means it is normal during start. The reason for that is like because the battery needs to charge, right? So at other times, this indicates that the alternator is not functioning on an overload condition exists in the system. Basically meaning that the battery is not receiving a charge. And during flight, if it happens during flight, the alternator is not functioning or an overload exists in the system. The battery is not receiving a charge. Possible causes would be that the master switch was accidentally shut off, or the alternator circuit breaker tripped. Okay, so what should you do if the ammeter is indicating a continuous discharge while in the flight? So you are in flight and the ammeter is indicating that there is like the continuous discharge. So the alternator has quit producing a charge, so the alternator circuit breaker should be checked and reset if necessary. And if it does not correct the problem, the following should be done. And the first step is that the alternator should be turned off. Pull the circuit breaker. The field circuit will continue to draw power from the battery. Okay, and then the second one is that all electrical equipment not essential to flight should be turned off. The battery is now the only source of the electrical power. Basically it means that when it is just continuously discharging, means just like in the regular cars, it is indicating that maybe alternator has gone bad, it is not charging anymore, and you should actually go into the mode where you should be using the electrical power wherever it is really required. So yeah, and again the third one is that the flight should be terminated and landing should be made as soon as possible. So this was continuous discharge. Now we want to cover the continuous charge. And this is even more like more dangerous, if not less. Like if compared to the previous situation where we have lost most probably like either there is a circuit breaker issue, or the other thing is if we have lost the alternator, then we are just left with the battery. But now if it is continuously charging, uh, so if it is allowed for an extended period of time, the battery would overheat and evaporate the electrolytes at an excessive rate, and a possible explosion of the battery could result. Electronic components in the electrical system could be adversely affected, and protection is provided by an overheat sensor which will shut the alternator down if an excessive voltage is detected. So the alternator should be turned off. Pull the circuit breaker, and all electrical equipment not essential to the flight should be turned off. The flight should be terminated, and landing made should be made as soon as possible. Okay, during a cross-country flight, you notice that the oil's pressure is low, but the oil temperature is normal. So our oil temperature is normal, but the oil pressure is low. So, like, what should you do, and why do you think it's gonna be happening? So, a low oil pressure in flight could be the result of like many of the several problems. The most common one being that of the insufficient oil. If the oil temperature continues to remain normal, right? A clogged oil pressure relief valve or an oil pressure gauge malfunction could be the culprit. But in any case, the landing at the nearest airport is advisable. Now we wanted to talk about the partial loss of power. So if a partial loss of power occurs, the first priority is to establish and maintain a suitable airspeed, right? Just like a complete stall, like a complete malfunction, right? So you're gonna be having a positive, like a suitable airspeed, and you're gonna be maintain that, and again, depending on how much the loss of the power is, but there should at least be the best glide airspeed is necessary. And again, you're going to be selecting the emergency landing area and remain within guiding distance. So basically we're going to be coming down if there is a partial power of loss, right? But again, depending on how much time you get, you can do a few things in order to troubleshoot, uh, and that would be check the carburetor heat. That's the first thing, right? Maybe it's just the drop in the RPM, and check the carburetor heat should be the first thing. Check the amount of fuel in each tank, and maybe it's just like you need to switch the tanks, right? Switch fuel tanks. And then the third is like the check the fuel selector valve's current position. So maybe it's in the off position, or maybe you just like it, or you just need to change the fuel. So basically, uh, kind of elaborating on the second point where we wanted to switch the fuel tanks, you need to also keep an eye on the valve position. Then check the mixture control, and then check that the primer control is all the way in and locked. And also check the operation of the magnetos in all three positions, both left and right. Sorry, both left or right. Gotcha. Okay, what procedures should be followed if an engine fire develops in flight? So first thing is that if there is an engine fire, you need to uh, set the mixture control to idle cutoff. So it's gonna be cut off. Set the fuel selector valve again to you're gonna be turn the fuel selector valve to off, and turn the master switch to off. Set the cabin heat and air vents to off, and leave the overheat vents on. Then you're gonna be establishing an airspeed of 100 knots. Uh, uh, it's actually called the recommended speed is 100 KIAS, which is basically the knots indicated airspeed, right? And increase the descent again depending on the how much fire there is, and execute a forced landing. Okay, the last thing I wanted to cover is like the same engine fire, but this time it happens on the ground, and it is happening during the startup, like starting the engine. So not so intuitively, what they recommend is like you need to continue to attempt an engine start, as a start will cause flames and the excess fuel to be sucked back through the carburetor. So it's very to me at least it's very not intuitive, but the recommended thing is that you wanted to start an engine and there was an engine fire, you still want to try to start the engine, right? And the reason, as I just said, that uh, it will cause, like this starting of the engine will cause the flames and the excess fuel to be sucked back through the carburetor. Okay, so now you see the fire, you are trying to start the engine again, But there are two conditions. There are two scenarios. One is that if the engine does start, uh, actually we're gonna cover three scenarios that the engine is started. The second one is that uh, engine does not start. Right. Third one is that the fire continues. You still tried starting the engine, and it still didn't happen. The fire is continuing. So what should we do? So if the engine starts, increase the power to higher RPM for a few moments, right, and shut down the engine and inspect it. So we saw the fire. We still wanted to want to try to start the engine. We want to increase the RPM for a few seconds and then turn off the engine. If it does not start, right? We did that. It doesn't start. So set the throttle to the full position. Set the mixture control to idle cutoff. Continue to try an engine start in an attempt to put off the fire by vacuum. So if the engine starts, it's gonna help to finish, like extinguish the fire because of the vacuum. And the last thing is that if the fire continues, turn the ignition switch to off, turn the master switch to off, set the fuel selector to off, and just evacuate the aircraft. Those were the things I wanted to cover. Thanks for watching.